Casablanca could have... What?
Casablanca.
Casablanca.
Just read the line that you wrote.
Oh, just read the line that I wrote.
Yeah,
Is that what you want me to do?
Why else are we here?
I don't know. I thought we were really developing a nice bond. Thought we had some banter going before we started recording.
Not really, I just want to get home, to be honest.
Alright, to your lonely apartment with your cat?
Yeah, well, I think you prefer the lonely apartment right now.
I do actually. I like loneliness. It's nice.
So that wasn't really against me, was it?
No, but you're just sad.
You don't know me.
I don't want to know you.
That's fair.
So you want me to read the line that I wrote?
I mean, if I say it, I'll inflect in a way that you probably don't appreciate.
Okay, that's true. Okay, let me read this out. Casablanca could have either been a compelling tongue-in-cheek look at the impact individuals can have in the course of a geopolitical event, or a flashed-out, passionate tale of love.
Flashed out?
Fleshed out. I thought, did I say flash?
You said flashed.
Oh, I thought I said fleshed. A fleshed-out, passionate tale of love. Instead, the story forces a single fascinating character, Bogart's Rick Blaine, into an unfulfilling and shallow romance, leaving the entire piece a mess of both genres. What do you think about that?
I'm just shaking my head.
Did you like those inflections?
You know, I thought you were being a bit more angry, actually.
I'm not an angry man.
Yeah, well, you will be after this.
I'm a very happy individual.
In a very unhappy marriage, yeah.
Excuse me? What do you know about my marriage?
You're right, I don't want to know about your marriage.
Good, keep it that way.
Alright, so this is a blasphemous take. Seriously, on a seminal film.
Seriously?
Seriously. Casablanca's transcendence is no mere accident, and is thankfully preserved by better minds than my associates here. Now, while a short lens, Mr. White... Do you get that pun there about the short lens with your glasses?
I got it now.
Now, while a short-lensed Mr. White can misunderstand this film's scope, and covet a fleeting political sentiment in place of the profundity offered in the personal history of protagonist Rick...
I have a feeling you're reading this. Am I right in saying that?
I wrote a bit down, yes.
Profundity?
Profundity, yes. It's a good word. I had to write it down.
I know, because you don't use it in day-to-day conversation. Everyone can tell.
I've probably used it one time or another. Anyway, he inevitably takes for granted the wonderful characterization of such a character. And not just him, mind you. We have a rich cast of 3D characters given life by experienced actors in a lively, fully constructed world whose existence you imagine off-screen. Nothing to say yet?
You know, I'm just going to wait for you to finish your essay, and I've prepared some statements of my own.
Oh, I'll be looking forward to it. Okay, well, now let's touch upon the romance of this film, which forms for me a compelling crux of the narrative. All Mr. White here can do is equate the length of the relationship to meaning it is somewhat shallow in its impact. This is quite the farcical statement for a critic whose ideal conception of love comes from a Jim Carrey flick. What compels me is the lingering question I still have after multiple viewings, which is whether it was a reciprocated love. The answer still evades me, but ultimately intrigues me on each rewatch. It subverts the cliched outcomes so prevalent in the manufactured Hollywood love stories of the time, which in itself earns merit. What this film doesn't get enough credit for is how it drives forward in and out of genres without compromising the development of character, the witticism of a sharp script, and the striking of tone elicited through well-constructed noir effects and a timeless musical score. So why do I hold this film in such esteem? What elevates it above others? How does someone from this generation identify with so many elements of an unfamiliar time? Now, I am unapologetic in my upfront assertion that one should not look to untangle the professional and personal resonances in a film. Human people are human moviegoers, both flawed and flawless in their vision. Our informed opinions on films are delivered from the subjectivities and objectivities that should be proudly paraded as such. I subjectively want to watch this film again and again and live with Rick's suave cynicism, and I objectively admire the way his cynicism compels the story's progression through deft suspense and romance and melodrama. Never has a film struck such a chord on an artistic appreciation level, with such an enviable, perfect writing, or captured my childlike imagination to embody the personas of this fully realized fictional world. But that is the worth of this film, its ability to communicate the pure humanity of man, a man so alike yet so elusive. It is what all works of art seek to represent, the nature of us all. It becomes, to use a poorly formed analogy, a finely arranged bouquet of love, sacrifice, war and violence, greed and fate, duty and cynicism, all the while secreting a fragrant, prevailing bond of friendship.
You're a lovely writer. I'll give you that. That was a lovely analogy.
I think that's the first nice thing you ever said to me.
That's the only nice thing I'll ever say to you. Enjoy it. Breathe in that bouquet of lovely compliments that are wafting towards...
Didn't do much for me, to be honest. But go ahead.
I just so like I said, I've written some things down. But before I do, some call it a Jim Carrey flick. I personally like to call it a Kaufman flick. You know that guy who also wrote Adaptation.
I don't remember seeing
Human
Kaufman on
Nature.
the film. Did he appear?
No, he's the screenwriter. You know, writers is someone who you should be defending. And Charlie Kaufman being one of the greats, I just assumed you'd be familiar with some of his work. But by all means, call it a Jim Carrey
familiar,
flick.
but it's funny that...
Call it what you will.
Did you think he had any say in who played his main character?
I think he would have objected if Jim Carrey didn't perform such an epic job.
I try to inflect the good points.
What good points?
I'm not a reader, I'm a writer.
There are no good points here.
I'm a reader, I'm a writer.
There are no good points about this movie. Actually, that's a bit of a lie.
Do you want... I mean, I'm happy for someone else to read what I wrote, but I was never a good orator.
But then I'd never get to try to avoid looking at such a pretty face.
I'm glad that I don't have to look... I get to look at a black shield.
You love my big black shield, don't you? Okay, no. Mr. Black. Sweet, innocent, misguided Mr. Black. The way you're evangelizing this movie is only matched by the overhyped nature of the following behind it. But I will give you this. I'll give you another compliment. It's not an accident that this movie has lasted the test of time. It's just simply probability. That's it. I mean, the director, Michael Curtis, he directed 166 titles throughout his career, and the Epstein brothers who wrote this script, they've written over 50 screenplays in their lifetime. When you're pandering to the widest possible audience across 210 different titles, throwing everything you have at the wall, something is bound to stick. Basically, Casablanca is a success at worse odds than Stephen King's writing, but better odds than L. Ron Hubbard's. So really, by your rationale, you should read something like Dianetics, and it might become one of your favorite books. Who knows? Maybe a religious enlightening is something that you need, but that's not for me to judge. In addition to you being caught up in that populist netting of yours, it's led to all loss of sense in reality. You've just called a single developed character a cast. And I'm not ashamed to grant you that Rick Blaine is fascinating. I adore the subtlety in which auxiliary dialogue grows to develop this moral character of a stoic and cynical protagonist. It's fascinating. And even as he desperately attempts to hide that side of him behind capitalism, greed, his callous approach to the individuals around him by never wanting to sit with patrons and have drinks and forcing people to be left at the door, such as the head of Deutsche Bank or even the second biggest Austrian bank in the world. I only wish that they had continued that level of quality and detail and subtlety beyond the single character and beyond the first act. I mean, instead, the audience is handed a middling romance with the middling Ilse Lund, a woman lacking any character or charisma. A cardboard cutout would have equally played out the direction that she was given. Look pretty, say nothing, gaze longingly at whatever we place in front of you. Here, look at Sam, now at Rick, now at Victor, then at Renault, now this camel. Oh, a pot plant, look at that for a while. And all she'd do was well up with tears and just stare at it as a single tear trickled down her cheek. Which, granted, fantastic work from the actress, but that's all she did throughout the entire film. For a bachelor like you, someone like Miss Lund may be enough. She is, after all, a product of the same recycled garbage that romanticism has fed the masses for centuries. Glorified views of instantaneous, insurmountable love almost guaranteed by higher powers to have been brought about by fate, and do not require any further explanation. That is what this movie hands us. But to see such a formidable character like Blaine brought down by a flawed, lazy concept, executed with the delicacy of a freighter carrying elephant shit, this is why this movie irks me so much. And by circumventing the audience expectations in the final scenes, and by following common sense rather than the romantic model that you said yourself Hollywood dishes out every single time they make a movie like this, it doesn't exclude the cliches that are witnessed for the rest of the film. This film's so-called catalyst is the literary equivalent of Jane Austen writing "One thing led to another, and Miss Elizabeth Bennet fell in love with Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy." The end. I'd describe that as poor storytelling at my kindest, and as such, it is left entirely up to the individual to project wholly subjective attitudes on what is, in its entirety, a bland story full of simpletons. It tells us more about your psyche than the quality of the movie. Should you separate yourself from the film, you'd find that Ilsa was not in fact in love with Rick, merely infatuated, and that the truly compelling tale of love was in fact between Ilsa and Victor, or Renault and Rick, who I would argue was one of the first bromances seen on the silver screen.
For a lot of negative points, you do make a lot of positive.
I think the weight of my negativity well outweighs the minor technical positive points of this film, which, technically speaking, there are huge amounts of positives. It is well shot. The set design is impeccable. I would have not guessed that it was all done in a studio. I would have thought that it was shot on location. Granted, they had set it up to be a slightly, derivative form of that location, but it was well styled. The camera work was good. The lighting was impeccable. The dialogue, which I separate from the story, was witty, and it has stood the test of time. But my biggest complaints, and the reason I go to the cinemas, is to get a story that is high quality and I get something out of it. I got nothing out of this, story-wise. Story-wise.
But then you're pretty much dismissing all the other aspects of the film, while still at the same time praising them.
Yeah, well, to use your bouquet, I mean, a photo of a bouquet is fine. It can be technically compelling, but ultimately, it's something that comes in a frame as a stock image.
Look, I just want to harken back to that one point, this asinine comment that you mentioned about how...
Asinine? Nice
That's
work.
It.
And you're not even reading off a script. I'm impressed.
So what did you say? You said that or the audience projects a wholly subjective attitude toward an objectively mediocre whatever crap you spouted.
Crap? Sir, how dare you? This is a children's program.
But, I mean, are you saying that we shouldn't be doing that? I mean, I don't understand that point at all, to be honest. Everyone goes to the film, they're going to get something different out of the film. No matter what objectively, beautifully created it is, there's something subjective that you will take away from it. Projecting anything that I enjoyed the romance aspect of the film, you didn't. Does that make me wrong and you right? Does
yes.
that make... I mean, for Ilsa, to me, she served as a formidable love opponent to Rick's cynicism.
Okay, tell me how. Tell me what she said that convinces you that she served as a formidable
Does she
lover.
have to say anything?
Yes.
Why?
Because she needs to prove herself as an individual that can overcome that sort of cynicism. And that's what I meant by the laziness. And why I compared it directly to Jane Austen.
Never read it.
I don't know what kind of writer you are to have never read Pride and Prejudice.
I think I read the first page. Casablanca, for me, it's an epilogue to another story that we don't see. Obviously, we are following Rick, and it's an aspect, a time of Rick's life where he's been through a lot through the war. He's been through a lot. We see in the flashback scene. This is an epilogue. So why do they do this? Why do they focus on something that a lot of people argue that we want to see? I mean, we do see for a tiny aspect of the film their love story and the way that they met and stuff. But look, we don't know Rick at all. I mean, you say he's a fascinating character, and he is. But let's be honest, we don't know him. We love him. We find him fascinating, but we don't know him at all.
Well, we know quite a lot about him just based on the subtext that I mentioned. We understand that he is an individual who stands up for his morals, not only for himself, but the morals that he deems the most appropriate for society. And this can all be taken away from the discussions that he has about the two wars that he fought in, the Spanish Civil War and when he was also in Ethiopia as a gun runner. Now, these are two important components if you understand the history of what that meant for an American going into those two wars, particularly the Spanish War. So the Americans were not involved in that scenario. They were technically neutral in that situation. And the Americans that went over there basically went on their own accord to fight what they considered fascism and communism, and the threat against democracy.
My point is, you don't need to know this.
No, you do, if you want to understand the character fully. Because you're saying
But my point is, you don't need to.
Yes, we do. If we want to understand Rick and what makes him such a compelling character, it's details like that. And when you understand the history of the situation...
I prefer, once this film ends, to go, now I can imagine how he was before. I can imagine how he's going to be. I like to I admit, subjectively project my own little assumptions about his character.
But and that's why I'm arguing with you, because you're saying that you don't know anything about the character when you actually
you don't know his history.
You do. You find out bits and pieces of his history. You find out enough.
You don't know why
to paint a decent picture of what he's like. You don't know how you know to a degree how he wound up in Casablanca, and you don't know exactly why he left America or can't go back. But there's enough there to paint a fairly objective, compelling picture of his character.
It's not objective. It's not. It's through.
It is, again,
third person.
based on the history, based on his history that is read out to him throughout the film by Renault and the Nazis. You learn objective components of his character.
Yeah, we also learn from a lot of his bar staff as well.
Less so, because that comes later. And the bar staff comes after a particular act of kindness that they hadn't seen before. But what I was trying to get to before is the romance is poorly done because we're just expected to believe that someone who has very few lines in the movie and does not prove herself to be a compelling character somehow won over who looks like a cynical, stoic individual. And my problem is, particularly with the flashback, that we're shown just enough to believe that Rick was in love with this person, and then we're never shown why. We're never given a reason to care about Ilsa, and as an extension of that, we're never given a reason to care about their relationship with one another.
Well, my point is that Ilsa is what she is. She's a beautiful woman.
She's a beautiful
woman.
Who
comes into Rick's life at a time where he's battling in a war, or he's been in a war. He's probably seen and experienced a lot of shit that she, for that brief time, made him forget.
So show us that. That's more compelling than what we got to see.
But I imagine that to be the case. You hear about her beauty. You see it on the screen. She expresses it through beautiful close-ups by the director.
If I ever see a soft lens on a woman again, I'm going to lose my shit. For me, there's nothing there. There's no interaction. All the writers do is show us this relationship and just tell us, believe this. Like, there's no reason for you to believe this, but believe it anyway. Believe that this is a thing. And that's why I focused on the period of time so much.
You mentioned another point in time that you didn't enjoy the flashback scene or see its purpose.
Yes.
Okay, explain to me then, how would you have expressed it?
Okay, the reason that the flashback wasn't enough was because it showed us the same BS that a lot of Hollywood films show us, in that it's always moments of love. It's always the most affectionate moments that they show us in a montage of scenes, and that isn't...
But look, it comes at a time when he's in a bar drinking, and he's reflecting on those moments, so it works. He's not going to be all down and upset because he's thinking of all the crappy moments in the relationship. But here's the thing, he focuses in a brief time, in a brief window. That could be it. That's all what we saw is what it was. And for what it was enough for him.
But my problem with showing the flashback is that it would have been a far more powerful thing if they had done it all in dialogue. If they had sat there and spoken once she walks into the bar as he's drinking after he finishes his flashback, if they had done that dialogue where they talk about the two different stories, that would have been enough for me, because I wouldn't have been shown just enough of the relationship to fill in the blanks myself. Then the imagination could have taken over. But by showing those two interacting in that way, it ruined it for me. It snuffed it out. You're the one that's defending it as some sort of revolution against the state of romanticism in Hollywood for the time. And I don't see it. I don't see that being the case. Sure, they circumvent the audience in the final stages, which is fine. I give credit where credit is due. But the story itself is weak to me, and it was made weaker by showing it.
I still, even now, I'm sure on future rewatches that I'll still be unsure about how she sees Rick.
I'm not.
Yeah, but you critic types always.
But it's not just me, it's even her. She says it. She says it herself, twice.
And what she says is, what, gospel?
She says it. She's the character.
Doesn't mean she loves... Well, you think she loves him, but you don't know.
But even she says that she loved him, but not in the way that she thought. which is infatuation, which is what I said. That it's not love coming from her, it's infatuation.
But we're not focusing on her.
Well, I was.
We're focusing on him. It's his love story.
Yeah.
So it's love.
For him.
For him.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that he is in love with her. I don't understand why he's in love with her. She cried every scene she was in. She just gazed at him. Did she just gaze at him the entire time they were together?
Just being subversive for sake of being subversive. I mean, I don't know. I believed it, and I don't know. Maybe you just didn't see it.
And that wasn't there.
Maybe it was his only girl.
Doubt that. We open up on him tossing a woman into a cab.
That's after.
I think it would have been well before, too.
We don't know that. We can't say that. We don't know.
Well, we can't say that it was his only one either then.
But we can't. I mean, I assume it could be.
I assume it's not.
But then you're pretty much. Then it would have no impact at all if you're.
Not necessarily. I think in that case it would have been more impactful if that was the case.
But you're just saying she wasn't. In your eyes, she wasn't any. She doesn't seem like anything to him.
Yeah, in either case, she doesn't seem like anything to him. Because for me, I still don't understand what swayed him towards her. Because, like I said from the very beginning, she has no character. She has no traits. She has nothing compelling.
I don't know. Maybe you're watching something else.
Again, for me, there was nothing to see.
Maybe you were swayed because you couldn't latch onto that. This wasn't a political film. This wasn't focusing on.
And that's where my frustration comes in, because one took away from the other. And that's why this would be a completely different conversation if they had focused on either the love story in its entirety, so seeing it the whole way through, or if they had focused on the political side that they were setting up in the entirety of the first act. The entire first 45 minutes is basically setting up the risks associated with being in Casablanca, the weight of Victor Laszlo, both in Casablanca and as a target by the Nazis. It sets up the Nazi occupation. It sets up Renault as being both a contact to Rick and a contact to the Nazis. And it sets up Rick's establishment as a hub for all of these activities to occur. That was the whole first 45 minutes.
Look, for me, this film explores more just the nature of one man. And all that is just superfluous stuff that happens in his life at that moment in time. I mean, he's thrust into a reluctant hero's role.
I want to hear, genuinely, because you're loving it. I've given you reasons why I appreciate this film to a degree. I want to hear something that you don't like. We're going off book. We're not going on the plans. We've gone through our notes. Now we're just going to ad-lib it. I want to hear stuff that you don't like about this film, because you're too happy with yourself.
The opening.
So what I liked.
Yeah.
Are you just trying to be confrontational?
No, I didn't see the world didn't matter to me at all in this film. It really, if you take away the world, you could still make this story to me.
So in that case, why wouldn't you want to focus more on the relationship? Why do you think it's good enough without the world, if you could ignore the world?
But we're still focusing on Rick and Rick's story, Rick's life.
So what you're saying is that as long as that character was there, it could be a completely different film.
As long as Rick's there, it is a film. I mean, he makes the film.
But there's nothing special about the film itself aside from Rick.
No, the other cast of characters, the way they interact in Rick's world is interesting.
But the story doesn't matter to you. It's just him. So it's a character study for you.
I mean, I'm interested in this character, yeah. I mean, yeah, everything that is conveyed on film is part of his world, and it affects his character mostly. It's his bar, it's his scene, it's like how he reacts to everything. And so you could put that anywhere. I mean, you could put him in a bar in modern day and see how he reacts to different people.
Yeah, I think they were thinking about doing that not too long ago.
Yeah. But that doesn't need to be done. It doesn't need to be done. It doesn't need to be done because it was done, and it was done perfectly.
You don't care what happens. So Casablanca as a film doesn't matter to you so much as just that character or a subset of the characters within the film.
Look, it was well done. The world was well developed and fully realized, and I appreciated it. But you're saying, I mean, the opening sets up this story in during time of war, and with Nazi occupation going on, that stuff, the political side of the story never engaged me as much.
But that's where the weight of this story is, if you really think about it. That's what the entire story. And this is odd because I'm actually going to start defending this film in terms of the first act. But the entire story is weighted on.
I like the first act. I didn't like the opening. Because
what,
it's not
the
world, like,
only example of a white man being profiled and then runs away and he's shot unarmed. That opening.
You're opened on a world where you don't know. There's no one who are you invested in. There's no person or character that you are supposed to be identify with, and it's just a poor.
But it's setting up the stakes, because you find out that you find out about the tickets that are inevitably going to be given to Ilsa and to Victor. You find out about the veracity in which punishment is dealt out in Casablanca by the Nazis and any Nazi sympathizers. People are shot. And it's also a nice change to see individuals in an African nation complaining about immigration to their cities for once. So there's some compelling moments for me in today's time, but everything is pretty much the weight of the situation and the tension is set up in those opening moments. And without that, this movie, it doesn't really matter. There are no stakes. There are no reasons for Ilsa and Victor to be desperate to leave. There is nothing compelling Renault to act the way that he does.
Look, I'm saying,
and Rick wouldn't be the opportunist.
We could have opened at Rick's, and that could have naturally come about those stakes in other ways that they could have done it.
Do you feel you relate to Rick?
I share some of his cynicism at times. I also share his idealism and his sentimentalism, especially towards other people, and the idea of love. Am I Rick? No, I wasn't. I'm not as quick-witted as Rick. I wish I was.
I don't think anyone could be as quick-witted as that entire cast of characters. It was Sorkin-esque, the level of quips going back and forth.
Well, that's a bit of a...
You're right. Sorkin's better at it than these writers.
You are way off.
I think I'm pretty on point.
The difference between this and Sorkin is that this has characters. Sorkin has character. One character who could say the whole film and you wouldn't know who was speaking.
You know the difference between Casablanca and anything Sorkin's written? Everything Sorkin wrote is good.
Well, you just wait.
At least you'll learn this. At least you learn something when you watch Sorkin. There's nothing here.
Very preachy. Mindless. Very preachy.
Have you?
Very preachy.
Wait until you hear yourself talk about this film.
Well, I'm not. I'm preaching. They're not. They don't preach it.
You do.
I preach it. Sorkin's characters preach his own films for him.
Oh, later on. Not so much in the early stuff.
I didn't mind The Social Network.
That was good.
I didn't mind Moneyball.
That was less good. That's only because I go sports. I don't know. That was baseball, right?
Yeah, make a movie about statistics in baseball.
He made that fascinating. He made stats fascinating. There you go. And the Epsteins couldn't even make war and romance fascinating.
If this film had focused on those aspects more, I don't think it would have been as highly regarded as it is.
Tell me why, like the balance. How does the balance work for you? Because I don't see this as a balanced film.
Not really. I mean, the need for transit visas is still a driving force for. But
that could have been set up without paying so much attention to the political side. That could have easily been set up, like you said in your cut of the movie, just in the bar, as a passing word, in the same way that a lot of Rick's character was set up, with throwaway lines.
I mean, Rick, you say that he makes an easy decision in the end, but he could have made the decision to let Victor be captured or taken, and maybe he could have found a life after that.
I don't think I said easy decision. I think I said the logical decision. Because it is said during the film that he can't go back to the US.
Yeah. But, I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's always that... The threat of the Nazis, the political stakes are always there. And they're involved in their relationship because if they weren't there, there's nothing keeping Ilsa and Victor together in Rick's eyes.
But I mean, that could have been done with less detail, and more attention could have been focused on the love side of things. Because I went into this film. This is the first time I'm watching it, just for this analysis, and I watched it twice. And the second time, I'll admit, I liked it more because the shock that it was a romance in the first time kind of tainted the whole thing for me. And so the second time, I was able to, ease into it a little bit more and gain some appreciation for the few things that I found to appreciate.
Well, I will disagree. I mean, they never... It's always there, that the presence of... I mean, I said the political and personal... that clashed and that coming together, it makes the movie more powerful, I think.
All right, fine. Go to your review. You don't know what you're talking about. Go to your
rating.
Your rating. Go to your final rating.
Okay. So water, food, shelter, Casablanca. Now that may be too high regard, but I'll put it along the same. I'll compare it with an analogy along the same lines. Casablanca to me is like a desert island rum. I mean, it doesn't age, and it makes our loveless, fruitless, and tedium-filled lives all the more bearable with its sweet sentimentalism. That's my rating. That's how I see the film.
Is that it? Do you want to keep going? Is there another chapter?
No.
Do you have an appendices you want to go through?
Short and sweet.
And
impactful.
Very emotive and full of metaphor.
And profound.
I'll use a metaphor of my own. I'll double down on the hatred.
Casablanca is a MacBook. Pretty enough to look at, oftentimes only available in black and white, vastly overhyped, overpraised, and, much like Casablanca's original unproduced script, overpriced. Dive beneath the hood and the branding, however, and the beauty disappears. All you find is a substandard experience that requires the imaginations of its fanatics to give it any sort of substance. At their cores, both are only truly carried by the legacy of a single fascinating character known for being a bit of a baby and spending an inordinate amount of time hiding from women. There are far more powerful experiences out there, so why bother with something the masses flock towards?
I'm not going to be getting any Apple sponsorship anytime soon.
I would reject it at a moment's notice.
And as I close my MacBook Pro...
Disgusting. Actually, I don't know if I want to do the MacBook.
Well, that's pretty good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I know, but that's gonna fuel hatred in and of itself.
Who cares? You want to be hated. One of us should be hated.
So it's me.